I will give the floor for Mr. Michal Jarocki from MilMag in Poland. And let me remind our viewers and listeners for this panel and other panels to be active. Write their questions in the chat that is available in the landing page, and we will then be able to pose them for the question and answer session. Thank you, and dear Michal, the floor is yours.
Dear Otto, thank you very much. My name is Michal Jarocki. I'm joining you from Warsaw, Poland. I'm the editor-in-chief of the MilMag Defense and Space magazine, and I'm honored to be moderating this panel on defense. As we all know, defense is a crucial factor determining policies of all countries in the Baltic Sea region. It is a significant motivator pushing them forward to establishing deepened cooperation in such fields as international security, foreign policy, or industry and advanced technologies. In result, these countries gain new capabilities to confront current and future threats of all kinds, therefore significantly enhancing their safety, security, and prosperity. And these are the issues which I would like to talk about today during this panel with my highly experienced experts on the matter, Mr. Jorgen Elfving from Sweden, Dr. Zdzislaw Sliwa, Ms. Aleksandra Friede from Germany, Colonel Petteri Kajanmaa from Finland, and Dr. Sjolin from Sweden as well. So I just want to leave the floor for the panelists and give them a few minutes time to make their opening speech and to share their views on the matter of defense and security within the Baltic Sea region. And following that, we'll have an open discussion during which we could comment those views and share our own perspective on the matter. Therefore, Mr. Elfving, if you would be so kind to start with your speech, that would be great.
Where is he? Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry for delivering my presentation this way, but due to personal reasons, I had to abstain from a personal appearance. To begin with, I would like to introduce myself. I'm a former army officer, and most of my career has been focused on the Soviet Union and Russia. Russia has also kept me occupied after my retirement, and besides working for different governmental agencies and others, I have also written a number of articles for a Swedish and foreign audience. The Baltic Sea region has over time gone through a number of changes, some for good, some for worse, and the last change occurred in 2013 when Russian backfires carried out mock attacks on Swedish targets, followed 2014 by the annexation of Crimea, respectively the unrest in eastern Ukraine. Events which in combination with the reformation of the Russian armed forces has led to an insight that the Russian military intervention in the area might be a possibility. This has resulted in NATO's forward presence in the area and other measures in order to deter Russia, respectively, and increased military capability among the Western BSR countries, all efforts aiming at deterring Russia. Deterrence in the BSR is, however, a complex issue, as Sweden and Finland are not members of NATO. Norway is not a member of NATO, but not a member of the European Union. And in addition to this, we have the Swedish Solidarity Declaration of 2009. Deterrence is a question of capability, will, and perception. In most cases and traditionally, deterrence is linked to military capability, that is, boats on the ground, interoperability, and level of training, etc. What I see as beneficial in this context and in the present situation would be an enhanced regional cooperation in the BSR, for example, joint planning and joint procurement of equipment. If the latter could be achieved, it would simplify logistics and be cost-effective. To this should also be added advantages when it comes to training and interoperability, respectively enhanced tactical freedom of action, especially when it comes to temporary composite units. Another area is exercises, not the least exercises addressing the question of bringing reinforcements to the BSR and involving Sweden and Finland in order to iron out questions related to the respective countries' host nation support agreement with NATO. But the exercises ought also to pay attention to a changed battlefield. A battlefield where unmanned aerial vehicles are abundant, and an electronic warfare environment where neither communications nor GPS work. Enhanced cooperation must, however, not be seen as a burden and a meaningless endeavor. In a best-case scenario, it will contribute to increased operability, increased both national and multinational capability, and thus deterrence. What could have an impact on deterrence is Sweden and Finland becoming members of NATO. However, that will not obviously happen in the near-time future, and the question is how such a development would be perceived by Russia. Undoubtedly, it will reinforce the Russian threat perception, result in their usual rhetoric about NATO's enlargement, and might even lead to preemptive actions. On the other hand, the official Russian view, at least when it comes to Sweden, is that my country is more or less a NATO member, albeit not officially. Therefore, a formal membership might not necessarily contribute to deterrence. If deterrence previously and traditionally has been a purely military matter, it is now encompassing other sectors of the society, especially seen against the background of Russian disinformation, subversion, espionage, and other efforts targeting the countries in the BSR. Efforts demanding an ability to be able to withstand hostile actions of a non-kinetic nature in the diplomatic, economical, cyber, psychological, and other arenas. That is, not leaving an opportunity for the adversary in one or more of these arenas, which he can use to achieve his goals. This is a challenge and calls for a total defense concept. A robust such a concept implemented in the Western BSR countries would undoubtedly contribute to deterrence in the region. Possibly, this will also demand mutual efforts as well as in establishing the concept as in the case of a crisis or an outright aggression. In this context, it is necessary for Sweden to show that the Solidarity Declaration of 2009 is not just empty words. According to my view, the way forward to improve Baltic Sea regional defense and deterrence is enhanced cooperation and common efforts in peace, crises, and if the worst occurs in an armed conflict. Thus, an adversary will not have the pleasure to divide and rule. United we stand, divided we fall. And with those words, I end my presentation and thank you for your attention.
We cannot hear you.
Sorry very much. Okay, thank you, Mr. Elfving. Now I'd like to give floor to Dr. Zdzislaw Sliwa. If you'd be so kind to start with your speech, please.
Thank you very much. I guess you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Okay, so Glenn Grant told almost everything, so I will just add some minor aspects to that discussion. That topic, which is coherence, is very important. It is also reminding me what was mentioned during one of conferences, ABCD, conferences in Tallinn, when it was said by one politician that from Baltic states' point of view, we were looking so urgently for partners outside that we forgot to cooperate internally. It is also linked with the fact that there were different stages of cooperation to build that coherence. After 2004, which is joining NATO, after 2008, Georgia, and of course, after 2014, Ukraine. So the perception of threat and perception of the need for regional cohesion was also changing. It was also growing. There are also some factors which are impacting it. Looking into geography, which was already touched by Glenn Grant, we are talking about a single joint operational area. And the point is that that area is extended toward at least Poland, because we cannot think about any security here in the region without taking into consideration Poland and of course Germany, which is the main logistics hub and also for US equipment. And the point is that that terrain is also quite well known by adversary, because adversary was here for many years, so they know the terrain. And also what is very important, borders are definitely in political mind. From military point of view, borders do not matter so much in the case of conflict. Russia also is proving ability to be ready to run operational level operations very easily. And even during Zapad 2017, they proved ability to deploy logistically. They proved ability to deploy troops to Russia, to Belarus in the short time. In that context, it would be also nice to mention that we are talking a lot about Suwalki Gap, which is important until crisis. Whenever we have conflict, we have additional borders, which is at least 200 in Kaliningrad, 400 in Belarus. So NATO border with Russia is extending extremely, especially as Russia and Belarus, they are united in Collective Security Treaty Organization, which is also having a kind of Article 5 in documents. Some years ago, we were talking about energy island in the context of three Baltic states. Could we now talk about security island? So it is also an issue which was mentioned. And of course, Baltic nations proved during COVID unity, because we had so-called Baltic bubble, which was connected with isolation of that region during COVID crisis, which is a kind of question now. There's also geographical complexity, because looking into the so-called Russian near border concept, we see Russian impact in Central Asia, we see war in Ukraine, we see currently pressure toward Belarus, we had war in Caucasus, and now discussion about peacekeepers in Moldova, which is to happen soon. It means, looking geopolitically, Russia is pushing that near border quite strongly. Who could be next? It's of course the question. The next point is historical context, which is used by Russia effectively within info operation compatriot policy, which is especially important for Estonia and Latvia. And also constant military build-up, which is West Military District, reinforcement of Kaliningrad 11th Corps, including, which is the well-known A2AD hub. So security is definitely understood. It's not a single nation issue. Now it is within region, out of region, within NATO, European Union. There are so many dimensions of security, from military, energy, economy, so many fields which are especially visible, as all are under constant hybrid attack. Looking into Baltic nations, we had 2%, which is already meeting US pressure, let's say. It was nicely done because of US Baltic Presidential Summit in April 2018. So the kind of interest of nations and US was there, strategic partnership is there. And we have also common voice of those three nations. We are talking about NATO, EU, we are talking about NATO Schengen zone in combination with PESCO military mobility. And we are looking closer from regional perspective toward Poland, which is quite important from a military point of view, and also close relations with Nordic nations. Just to mention NORDEFCO professional military working group, but also common recognition of conventional and hybrid threats. We have also minister level discussions about common operational picture. We have new combined joint staff element started in 2015, And also there is cooperation among territorial defense forces, which is very important because now we have cross-boundary cooperation. It is not within a nation only. And we have strong discussion about joint procurement, which is so far failure, just looking into procurement of combat fighting vehicles. At the same time, all nations are looking back into NATO strategy concept 2010, which is collective defense, crisis management, cooperative security. At the same time, nations are investing in host nation support, which is very important to host air policing, EFP, NFUs, but also the current multinational division North, which was mentioned. But at the same time, we can see really a problem with command and control, which is definitely not working at EFP level among EFPs. And like multinational division North sounds very good, but do we have any enablers at these enablers at the division level, air defense, artillery, and so on? So there are many questions. First of all, are we still united enough? Are we cooperating enough here within that small region? Is resilience of society building up to proper level? Is command and control to work? And in the case of any conflict, could we see any reinforcements to come in very short notice, which is connected with, just to mention, Kaliningrad or Petersburg, A2AD, which is denying any movement in short notice in air domain, sea domain. And could we again talk about security island for those nations in the case of any conflict? Over.
Thank you very much. And now I'd like to ask Ms. Aleksandra Friede to start with her speech, please.
Thank you. So it's hard to add something new now, but I shall brief and focus on two aspects. So the first is prevention for escalation, and the second is preparedness for escalation. The best prevention is actually dialogue to ease tensions and keep channels of communication open to avoid misunderstandings. This also means to cooperate on non-military issues with Russia and the Barents Euro-Arctic Council or the Council of the Baltic Sea States. But at the same time, it's also important to reduce interdependencies that could be weaponized by potential aggressors, be it in communication, transport, or energy, and also to strengthen our democratic governments to avoid cleavages within societies that could be exploited. And it has already been said, deterrence is a big issue. So to deliver a credible message to potential aggressors that an attack would be costly, illegitimate, and ineffective. And the main deterrent in the region is clearly NATO. Its presence in the Baltic Sea region, its Article 5 commitment, but there are also security guarantees at EU level, at NORDEFCO level. It was mentioned the Swedish unilateral declaration of solidarity and the agreements to improve operational interoperability in peace and wartime. And I think that's really important, the cooperation between the territorial forces. And there has been a letter of intent between Finland, Norway, and Sweden on this matter. There are also host nation support agreements. So this also contributes to the deterrence posture, as does societal resilience and resistance to some extent, especially if you assume that citizens are among the targets and first responders in crisis situations. But overall, I think the credible deterrence relies on the impression that allies will come to help and intervene effectively without delay. So there is a powerful response, and the basis are strong partnerships within and outside the Baltic Sea region. And there have been signs of ever closer cooperation within the region, but also ever closer partnerships with the US and with the UK. And I do think that the UK is also a very important actor with the Joint Expeditionary Force, which could have a bridging function in times of crisis. And it also plans to invest heavily in naval capabilities. This makes it a very important partner. And the second aspect is preparedness for escalation. So what happens if the crisis comes? So it matters very much to build up cross-border crisis response systems to detect, attribute, and counter threatening situations. It starts with information exchange. Glenn has already talked about it, so it's important to improve maritime surveillance, to have a recognized maritime picture. And I'm not sure if the EU can actually make this work as Glenn proposed in the beginning, because there are projects about this issue at the European Defence Agency, for example. And I think it suffers from the same problems as the Sea Surveillance Cooperation Baltic Sea, that it relies on national systems. And if data providers are not ready to share the data, yeah, it stops at the national level of commitment. But yeah, ideally, it also leads to joint threat analysis. But information exchange starts with military to military contacts, and there's also the Baltic Commanders Conference. And I think it can also contribute to align positions in the region and to exchange important information. Another aspect of preparedness is sustained financing of defense efforts, also after the pandemic, to keep investing in capability development and technological innovation, to further private public partnerships, and to streamline arms procurement. Further, it is of course important to exercise interoperability between allies, but also whole of government and whole of society exercises. Sweden just concluded its total defense exercise this summer, and I've read it in the RUSI report that it's still an issue that the armed forces have to move from supporting civil society to being supported by civil society. And I do think that Germany is lagging behind on this issue. We had a National Warning Day 2 months ago, and the idea was to have warning messages on your phone, sirens wailing, but most of the people, they didn't hear anything, they didn't see anything, so there was no sign that there is a warning day, and it also applies to me in Hamburg. There wasn't a sign of that. But yeah, it's an opportunity to actually improve the crisis response system. And the last aspect of preparedness is to build up functioning infrastructure, to have secure supply chains, to enable reinforcements. And I also see more and more regional efforts on this issue. There is a 3 Seas initiative via Baltica, via Carpathia, there are the PESCO projects on military mobility, but the budget has also been halved due to the corona pandemic. But I still see that there is some progress, and it was also mentioned that Germany seeks to become a logistic hub. I do see 2 problems, and I will stop on this note. The first is the risk of fragmentation. There is a lot of project-based cooperation in different formats. This allows the flexibility and pragmatic collaboration, but it also creates institutional complexity. And this could lead to a duplication of defense efforts, to an uneven flow of information, or an uneven access to decision-making circles. And the second problem, already discussed, is the uncertainty about the effectiveness of the crisis response system when it is needed. And an issue is, for example, the interoperability of different security guarantees. So the scope of application, implementation mechanisms, command and control. And the prime example is NATO's Article 5. So it officially applies to hybrid and cyber attacks. But as we all know, they are hard to detect and attribute. They create ambiguities. So this might delay or disunite responses. And to me, it seems that there is no effective deterrent for low-level interference. And I'll stop on this note, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. And now, Colonel Petteri Kajanmaa, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Michal. Good morning, all, and greetings from the military island of Santahamina here in Helsinki, Finland. Let me introduce myself shortly. I'm Chief of the Department of Warfare of the Finnish National Defense University, and I will shortly address the topic from the Finnish security and military point of view. Of course, I represent our university in the academic capacity, and my speech is not an official statement. I will offer 3 angles to the topic. Firstly, Finland is a Western state and have a status of military non-allied country. Being member of the European Union means us mostly economic and social coherence with Europe. We notice the security political importance of the Union, but at the same time fully understand that the EU is not a military political instrument. As General Pulkkinen already referred, our newly published government report on Finnish foreign and security policy states that cornerstones of the Finland's security are promoting security policy cooperation, strengthening multilateral cooperation, sharing global responsibilities, and peace building. Finland's choice not applying a NATO membership set us to the very interesting position in the time of possible armed conflict, as described Mr. Elfving. NATO officials have made it clear that application for membership would be welcome. Being a reliable military actor makes it much more appreciable to give military assistance if needed. Finland and Sweden as well frequently highlight the benefit of strategic ambiguity. That means the ability to signal greater openness to membership, which gives us room to escalate politically rather than militarily in the face of Russian aggression. I continue with my second point. As said, Finland's defense posture is slightly different if you compare to the other Western countries. We have maintained deterrence by denial for decades, and ground for our defense lays on the real wide-scale capacity of porcupine defense. Actually, Finland has developed its defense capacity starting from the days of the Cold War, and the focus has always been the security situation of which we face today, return of military threats to Europe. Potential military operations in the Baltic Sea region range from the covert operation and coercion to invasion and limited conventional war. Current technological development leaves open democratic nations bordering the Baltic Sea vulnerable for the wide range of hybrid operations. Finland has made significant material investments, and the biggest ones are still ahead. What I mean are the new fighters for our air forces and new vessels for our navy, altogether 11 billion euros. That gives us guarantee that our strategic concept will stay valid in the future. Dear participants, finally, as said all panelists before, the situation in the Baltic Sea region has been deteriorated after the illegitimate annexation of Crimea and due to the unstable situation in Belarus. The destabilization of the security environment is a shared concern of all its shoreline states, and they have already reacted. For example, at the end of August 2020, Sweden raised its defense readiness due to increased Russian training activities. And as mentioned, NATO has increased its presence in the eastern part of the alliance. International cooperation is a good and viable option for conflict prevention, as Mr. Glenn Grant said already before, because fighting means drawing from the national resources and capabilities. In the future, increased economic interdependencies will force the countries of the Baltic Sea region to tighten their partnerships and alliances, and to move to the more holistic operating culture. Despite the current development of the security environment, as Mrs. Friede already mentioned, and Finland sees that dialogue with Russia is essential, and diplomatic efforts must be the first priority to solve the intense security situation. Using any kind of sanctions or military force will not give an acceptable solution to the case or solve it peacefully. Challenges of the wide security, starting from the climate change to the cyber threats, provides a window to the open cooperation in the Baltic Sea region, and especially with Russia. That might be the driving force if we cannot fruitfully have a fruitful dialogue in the area of hard security. Thank you for your interest. I look forward to have a great conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now, Dr. Sjolin, please, we are curious to hear what do you have to say on this matter and what is your view on what we're discussing today, please. Sorry, Dr. Sjolin, you're on mute. Please unmute yourself, if I may say so.
Yeah. Now I'm on air as well. Coming with the first statement, a lot has been said. That's the good news or the bad news about coming towards the end. Namely, the first statement, every cloud has a good silver lining, and that brings us to what has Sweden done in the interim period. Well, there has been the rude awakening, namely Crimea and Ukraine, of course, thereof, saying that finally there has been the pendulum swinging in Sweden to, let's say, homeland defense in quotation marks. And the upcoming defense capabilities 2021 to 2025 certainly reflect this. The importance of defense of the Baltic states, and not least the northern route lines of communication to Baltic 3 via the Oslo area and via Trondheim, mid-Norway, west. And Sweden will provide direct support to the US. The discussion here is concentrated upon the ground forces, although my background is Air Force, but nonetheless, we concentrate ourselves upon the air arena. In the Swedish Defence Commission's report 2021 to 2025, which has been a very solid work, and the Defence Bill 2020 to be passed in the Parliament on the 15th of December, there will be the re-establishment of 4 regiments, 4 army and 1 amphibious plus 1 air wing. But nonetheless, as goes for the army regiments, will be tasked for what? Well, the strategic imperative, the key locations of those regiments relatively to the 2 major taskings seen in Baltic perspectives, namely the northern reinforcements of the not least amphibious US amphibious US air amphibious forces will certainly illustrate that from Oslo directly to mid-Sweden and then onwards to probably Estonia, or from mid-Sweden from Trondheim all the way to the ports of the port of Östersund, Umeå, and therefore from there directly east onto Finland, and from Finland onwards to probably Estonia. Then one could discuss, will it be Helsinki, will it be Turku, as the ports of debarkation. All this needs to safeguard that the heavy marine expeditionary forces, the stockpiled MEB, has the chance to progress this way, meaning that the ports of Gävle-Sundsvall, north mid-Sweden and the southern part are safeguarded. The northern flank, the twinning, Norway, Finland, Sweden, in terms of making this function, especially the Swedish-Finnish super twinning, including what is in Sweden called a little bit the Finnish brigade, namely it's earmarked the Swedish forces to have the opportunity to come into Finland and to support above all the eastern border and have a little bit of Arctic competence, meaning the trilateral agreement between Finland, Sweden, Norway about the Arctic, thereby showing incredible reaction, meaning the Russians can't take it for granted that there will be no reaction given they misbehave on the northern flank. And then to support this scenario of Trondheim, the Marine Expeditionary Brigade, the MEB, onto Finland to Estonia, there is the trilateral statement of interest between the US, Sweden and Finland 2018. So a bit of, let's say, the necessary bureaucracy and political wheeling and dealing has been to some degree taken care of. But as always, the devil rests in the details. To sum up a little bit, the reinforcements of US troops to Baltic 3 will be taken care of course, by the southern route, the Suwałki Gap, which has been mentioned by many, and the northern way from Oslo, West Sweden, mid-Norway, Trondheim, the MEB, by means of non-alliance support, primarily Sweden. All the host nation support agreement and agreements about joint training and all this in peacetime gray zone has already been taken care of. What is needed is, of course, participation into the non-alliances exercises to an even stronger degree. Political, there are limits to synchronization, however reality rules. Once it comes to the operational dimension, joint forces, of course, less of a hassle, and on the tactical, as far as we have seen, they're non-existent challenges. However, if this is to work, it needs some greenhouse support to expand upon the agreements. Not least, one could reflect about the challenges and blockings. What about the financing available in all our countries, the blue countries, post Corona? I don't think, being an economist from training and true background, will there be funding for all this in the blue countries post Corona? We need to achieve a lot, as Glenn stated, in many countries. And I would even advocate permanent missions in Baltic 3 from Sweden and Finland, not only as a show of waving the flag, but even to jointly and on a daily basis work. It has existed some time ago in the past, but then it vanished into thin air a little bit once the Baltic 3 fully joined NATO. And it might need to be reignited. We can learn from the past. And that would be a little bit my small contribution.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sjolin. I'd like to thank all the panelists for sharing your thoughts and views on this matter. And luckily, we still have some time for the following discussion. So I'd like to start the discussion with reference to like the aspect which was already mentioned by Mr. Grant and Ms. Friede, that is deterrence. And the way I see it, one of the pillars of deterrence is unity and cooperation, this multinational cooperation. And as much as we can agree, we and our countries here in the Baltic region, that from the defense and security perspective, Russia is one of the main threats for our safety and security and prosperity. I don't think that we have the same level of, let's say, capabilities in terms of confronting this threat. It results from the fact that some of the countries border with Russia, others don't. Some of the countries have greater capabilities in defense and providing security for their own territory. We operate different types of weapon systems. We have different capabilities in terms of investing and modernization of our weapon systems. So we are on different levels when it comes to our, let's say, readiness or preparedness for confronting such a threat which Russia poses. So I would be very interested in hearing your opinion or your view on how actually to launch this pan-regional, multinational cooperation, or to put it in other words, like united we stand, divided we fall. So how to reach this unity? How do you see it? Yes, please start, whoever is ready.
So I might start. Yeah, I think it's a basic question. How can we actually strengthen our unity within NATO, but also within the Baltic Sea region, within the EU? And there are a lot of discrepancies. And I don't think there is one single solution or one step that you can take to achieve a coherent region. What we see right now are a lot of projects that are taken up to actually cooperate flexibly on issues the participating states care about. And I do think it's a good way actually to improve security of the whole region, because you can't impose, one solution or one strategy to everyone. But if nation states decide themselves that they want to develop capabilities together because it's more cost efficient, it's also the way the Nordic Defense Cooperation started. I mean, we still have the sovereignty rights that we care about, and so I think it's the only way to actually get forward. And there are initiatives at EU level to actually have a joint threat analysis and to operationalize these threats, the strategic compass, so that actually all member states participate and that they can align whenever it makes sense for them. I'm not sure if it's enough, but actually right now I don't see any other way, because we're all democracies, we all have our domestic systems. So if nation states don't feel that they benefit from cooperation, they won't do it. That's my take.
Yes, if I can continue, I fully agree with Aleksandra, and unity is the key word, and that's why we have alliances. But if you want to have deterrence, you have to have reliable capabilities behind that deterrence. You can't create it other way, and that means that we have unity. We have to have a political will, and we have to have common exercises, and we have to show our will. Otherwise, if in this case Russia sees any friction between the unity or in the unity, then they will attack to that friction or borderline. Thank you.
So
yes, the doctors. Yes, please. Okay, please, Doctor. Dr. Sliwa, please.
Yeah. Well, how to proceed? Probably to build from the existing structures, reinforce those. There is a little bit the skeleton to work out of. We don't introduce some strange creature onto stage. Prepare in peacetime, and prepare and prepare and prepare. Although we have to abandon the plans once it takes place, but nonetheless a good structure at least to lean against, and then to exercise. Rotate the volumes or the cohorts of troop on both sides, that one gets learning. This is nothing strange. This is what we have practiced for years. And therefore, once it's actual, it's real, no one will raise the eyebrow. This is what we've always practiced. The new recognized standard picture. End of my sermon.
Okay, I will be very brief. I will also refer to what Petteri said before, because like Secretary General Stoltenberg said, it is all about combination of deterrence, defense, but also political dialogue, which was also mentioned by Petteri. So we could, of course, isolate Russia, but first of all, from deterrence point of view, we have that deterrence by denial, deterrence by punishment, but first of all, it's about cohesion. The next is will. And also, you need to show capability. The problem we have like EFP, from a military point of view, EFPs are not a kind of tripwire, which is another type of deterrence, let's say. But at the same time, we are showing, like Defender showed, capacity to develop, to deploy in very short time. But to make it happen, we need to show that NATO is strong enough. So EFP is a really strong political message, showing so many nations involved, because attack against any of them is attack against NATO as such, which is very important factor. And regionally, we have also that strategic leadership, which is with United States. Of course, when Russia is considering who could be opponent, NATO, yes, but first of all, it's of course a major competitor is United States. They are also looking in China, but US is definitely the main competitor. So deterrence here in the region is very limited because nations are very soft in that military language, let's say. There are not so many tools to do any deterrence by punishment. And if cohesion of NATO is spoiled by Russia, which is by info operation, they are also trying to divide the European Union using different tools. We have some nationalism supported by Russia also. So if they hit our cohesion, it will be a problem because like we see, who is playing the main role in Belarus? Still Russia is there in dialogue with Russia, Germany, France. We have in Caucasus, EU and NATO were relatively passive in the last conflict. It was Russia and Turkey to make the peace agreement. In Central Asia, Russia is also playing a role. We have new president in Moldova. Now we are talking about Russian troops or Russian peacekeepers in Naddnestria. So Russia is also playing a role. So they are also looking for window of opportunities. If we will give them, they will use it. And now we are having discussion about who will be next, because there are some suspicion that president is slightly not so good shape. So who could be next? What could be next? It's unpredictable. So nations here are living in the shadow of unpredictability and unclear future. Over.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who wants to speak on this matter? If not, I'd like to move on to another question because, as we know, as much as countries in our region will be the first ones to confront any form of threat or, let's say, aggression from Russia, we won't be able to oppose it effectively on our own, and we'll have to base our safety and security in the longer perspective on cooperation with, put it this way, external factors. That is, let's say, military forces from Western European NATO members, from United States, from UK. Some of those countries have already sent their troops, or at least small elements, small contingents to Poland or Baltic states. What is, in this regard, I wanted to ask, what is your view on the role, which, and this was already mentioned by Dr. Sliwa, what is your view on the role these countries and the way they want to, or they are able to help us and building this strong deterrence against any form of Russian aggression? What role do they actually play? Do you think this is a major game changer in terms of showing Russia that any form of aggression would be met with direct and strong response from us and our Western European and transatlantic partners? Or maybe it's just, you know, as small and as limited that it won't actually play any role in helping to enhance our safety and security?
If I can start, I refer to time which I stayed in the US and studied there, and I participated in one exercise where it was the South China Sea scenario, and I had to decide and give my best military advice to the minister that which country we will leave alone and which country we will defend. And if we talk about US or UK, any big player here in Europe, they will make similar choices. Of course, NATO members are in the different position, and that's why we, Finland, we try to keep our defense capability as high as possible, because we can't rely every case to the support. Of course, we wish to have that, and I'm pretty sure that Poland, as strong as they are, they have a similar situation. They believe that their own defense can support them. But in the position of three Baltic nations, it's slightly different, and they have to rely on NATO support. Over.
So if I may, when I was in Leavenworth, we had exercise about North Korea versus South Korea, so it was different scenario some years ago. Regarding that, definitely self-defense is key. The point is here, for From Baltic nations' point of view, as mentioned by Petteri, it's completely different situation looking into any kind of joint operation. There's lack of air force, there's lack of navy. So this is relatively small land forces, which is not matched to what Russia, West Military District, some 300,000 troops, tank army, whatever you can imagine, which is ready to do short joint operation with limited, in my opinion, with limited aim. Like in Poland, 1920, hope Russia will not get Vistula River even. However, if they will do small operation like Baltic nations, or even if they will take Narva, there could be a question from nations far away in the West. Should we die for Narva, or like in Poland, should we die for Gdańsk in 1939? So, and perception of Russian threat is completely different here because it is connected with history. That whenever we are moving a little to the West, perception of Russia is as enemies going down among populations. Now people are thinking more than COVID. Even in Estonia, there was one research, and among mid-age and young population, Russia threat was something like number fifth, sixth only. Because this is also connected with historical memories, and history is still playing a role in people's mind. This is also a different situation in Finland. You are facing Russia from winter war up to now forever. So I think Russia is ready to do short joint operation with limited aims. However, it would be later on a huge challenge for NATO to take that terrain back, because it's about credibility of organization as such. If NATO will fail, it will have long-term consequences, which is definitely not desired. Of course, we have initiatives like Joint Expeditionary Force. In a NATO last decision about was 30 battalions, 30 squadrons, 30 combat major vessels in 30 days. But do you believe that it will work? I have huge doubts about that. Okay, over. Jan is ready.
Yes, Dr. Sjolin, please.
Yeah. Well, friends, we saw one very effective measure taking place a good number of years ago. We might take the position of being in Berlin. Someone said, "Ich bin ein Berliner," however, with the terrible American accent. That was President Kennedy. If we could encourage Joe Biden to make a solid tour of the Baltic states, including Poland, of course, not in a negative way, but saying, we are back onto the arena, even to encourage them to take a clear role in the EFP, being one of the, could be a circulating force, but in the Poland, they are visible. However, I would like to see the similar position in the other three countries. Have a little bit stockpiled that still gives a small American fort, US fortress on ground in the area. That would be my small contribution. Pamper the relations with Joe Biden, make him in good Estonian, Latvian, Lithuanian, Polish, make his statement. That wouldn't be bad. And of course, to invite the Russians to be teaming up with the Americans once they are on the ground in the respective country.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who wants to share their thoughts on this matter? If not, we still have 5 minutes. So, and I suppose this will be the final question. Although I have tons more questions, but at the time is running short. So my final question would be this, and it will be related to the COVID-19 pandemic and the so-called post-COVID world. I would be very thankful if you could tell me how do you see the development of, let's say, security policy and all those investments which are related to that, including financial investments in your respective countries in the, as I mentioned, post-COVID world. Do you see that in the perspective of next 1, 2 to 5 years, the policies of your governments regarding safety security, regarding the security system of the Baltic Sea, regarding the threat from Russia? Do you see that those policies could change, and if yes, in which way, in result of the pandemic, in result of the economic crisis which might follow, and any other changes which are or could take place, could happen in your countries in result of the pandemic?
So if I may, very briefly, first of all, it's my, of course, personal opinion. The point is that COVID will hopefully disappear one way or another with vaccination. But the point is that Russia is and will stay there. So we cannot move Russia, which is impossible. So from nations, the policy will be followed. It will drive even a little stronger toward any kind of better coherence within common initiatives, because it has already started. Especially 2014 caused nations to think not a kind of selfish way, because we have more common project, more discussion. So my assumption is that the policy will not change, that 2% will stay. We have already long-term programs related with mechanization of forces, some investments within financial abilities of the nation. Those are here very limited. Like in Germany, we are talking about below 2%, but looking into how much it's really money. So definitely from a regional point of view, I think it is to stay as it is, and it will be driven by cohesion, support and messaging within NATO, within Union, but also investment in infrastructure to enhance that NATO Schengen zone, Rail Baltica, Via Baltica, to be sure that we have we are extending abilities to deploy any troops in a very short time within crisis, because during war, deployment will not be possible at all. Over.
Thank you very much. And I'm listening to other experts.
Yeah, I totally agree that most defense projects are designed for the long term. So capabilities that have already been acquired, they will come. And I don't see that there is a decrease in Germany's defense expenditure. Right now, it's not planned. It hasn't been publicized, but still, we can't actually foresee the economic recession that might come with the pandemic. And if there is not enough money, I do think it's hard in Germany actually to say that we spend the money for the military and not for civilian branches that actually need it. Because there is public support for the armed forces, but it's still limited. And we have actually invested a lot, or we plan to invest a lot. And so I don't actually see that this will decrease. But another issue in Germany is actually the discussion, where are our priorities? So is it actually Europe? Is it the Baltic Sea region? Or should we also send our navies, what is actually planned, to the South China Sea? And so that's another concern that might factor in.
Thank you very much.
In Finland, I think it's pretty much similar than Zdzislaw just explained, that policy is stable, no changes, not so much changes. And as I mentioned before, we have already invested quite a lot to our defense, and that all is approved by our parliament. So those 11 billion euros, it's already there. Of course, the downside, other side of the coin is that how much money is left for the army after that. But we are reaching the 2%, not rapidly, but in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. And how's the situation in Sweden look?
With the good news, the funding to the armed forces is going up, and nothing speaks against. Of course, if there would be a story unusual measures needed from economic standpoint, but good news, the debt, although increasing, the state debt is still extremely low, meaning there is leeway to keep up reasonable funding. And the plans look very optimistic for the defense sector. And there I would say that why doesn't one try to continue to spread the coherent cooperation and with the training? Of course, we need to have a better readiness. We saw it from the corona crisis in Europe, and not least in Sweden predominantly, in terms of stockpiling. That's an old lesson learned from the Cold War period we have sadly enough forgotten. And more of regional cooperation. EU could be a certain umbrella here, maybe, maybe not. We have a bit of eurosclerosis presently, but we have seen eurosclerosis before and it has been overcome. That's my small, let's say, silver lining of the cloud, finally, as the final words. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have to say that what you're saying is very comforting, and I'm very happy to hear that. And I think that with this final question and those answers, we can end our panel. I would like to thank you for your time, for your answers, for sharing your views and thoughts, and for the discussion. And I'll leave the floor to organizers. Thank you very much.
Thank you for moderation. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Michal, for moderating a very fascinating panel. And I think it was very important that we saw the perspectives of major players in the region, including Finland, Poland, Sweden, and Germany. Now we will have a short 5-minute break, and then we will continue with the panel on cybersecurity.